At my brother's wedding reception, I found myself crouched near the edge of the dance floor, plucking stray paper cups that had rolled dangerously close to the speakers. It wasn't a grand gesture, not some act of heroism, just me tidying up like I always did. A habit more than anything. The music thumped overhead, a catchy pop song layered with the hum of chatter and clinking glasses. But then came a voice sharp enough to slice through the melody and lodge itself right in my chest. Is that her? Looks like she came to serve, not celebrate. The words cut clean, crisp, loud, and unbothered. Tyler Cooper. Of course. Daniel's old college buddy who never learned when to keep his mouth shut. I remembered him from those chaotic game nights back when Daniel still crashed on my couch. Loud, brash, never thinking twice before speaking once. Always the joker. Always the one who didn't know when the joke wasn't funny. And right on cue, Aunt Karen chimed in her voice like nails on a chalkboard dipped in honey. Maybe she should grab a mop while she's at it. She snorted, nearly doubling over with laughter, slapping her thigh like she'd cracked the best joke of the night. I felt my fingers clamp down around that poor, crumpled paper cup, squeezing it tighter than I meant to. It was just trash, flimsy and insignificant. But right then, it felt like it represented every unnoticed, unappreciated thing I'd done to make this day beautiful. Every late-night spreadsheet, every early morning phone call to vendors, every dollar I'd scraped from side hustles and skipped meals to cover the bills no one else could. I kept my gaze fixed downward, willing my eyes not to betray me. Don't cry, Sarah. Not now. Not here. The reception didn't falter. The bass kept thumping. People kept laughing. Plates clinked, glasses clattered, and life for everyone else marched on. But for me, it was like someone had hit mute on the whole world. Slowly, deliberately, I rose to my feet. My knees ached more than I cared to admit the toll of long days spent standing hustling. My neck was flushed hot with shame as my heart pounded a wild, uneven rhythm. I was hyper-aware of the space I took up, of every glance real or imagined piercing through me. Why did Tyler's careless words dig so deep? Why did Aunt Karen's cackle feel like a slap? Was it my plain navy dress, a last-minute clearance rack find, because the catering deposit drained what little I had, or the worn-out flats I hadn't had time to shine? Maybe it was the messy bun that had started the day sleek, but was now surrendering to frizz and flyaways. I caught my reflection in a glass panel near the exit. Hair puffed out at the sides, a faint smudge on my wrist from helping the florist adjust centerpieces last minute. The other women floated by, draped in shimmer and satin glowing with champagne-fueled ease. Me, I looked like the hired help, tired, plain, out of place. But still, I said nothing. My lips pressed into a tight line as I busied myself clearing more cups, napkins, whatever was left behind near the gift table. Keep moving, keep quiet, disappear. Across the hall, Daniel was all smiles, clinking glasses with Olivia's family, his laughter loud and carefree. He hadn't heard. Of course he hadn't. And truthfully, I didn't want him to. This was his day. He didn't need to know about the countless hours I'd spent haggling with rental companies, or the day I'd told Jacob we couldn't afford his birthday party, because Uncle Dan's big day was more important. He never asked me to carry this weight, but he didn't stop me either. So I made myself a promise. Tonight I'd be invisible. For him. Just tonight. As I finished stacking the last of the cups, I glanced toward our table. There was Jacob, my 8-year-old rock, swinging his legs under the chair, his small sneakers bumping softly against the floor. His gaze met mine, steady, unblinking, his brown eyes, swirling with something far too mature for his age. I mustered a smile, weak and worn, before turning away. But what I didn't realize, what no one noticed in that moment, was that Jacob had heard it all. Every jab, every cruel laugh, and what that boy would do next. None of us saw it coming, not even me. Funny how life works, isn't it? We spend so much time keeping our heads down, doing the quiet work, assuming no one is watching. But sometimes it's the smallest moments, the ones we think are invisible, that have the most power. And if you're here listening to this story unfold, maybe you felt that way too. Maybe you've carried more than anyone sees. If so, take a moment to like this video, subscribe, and stay with me as we uncover the beauty in these quiet, unseen battles. My name is Sarah Miller, 35 years old mother, to a sharp-eyed boy with more heart than most grown men, full-time office manager by trade, part-time florist by necessity, and the unofficial fixer of all things broken in this family, whether asked or not. My entire life has been a quiet collection of invisible tasks, smoothing conflicts, patching holes, carrying burdens too heavy for others. That's just who I became. And most of the time, truly, I don't crave applause. But that night, the night of Daniel's wedding to the luminous Olivia Harper, something shifted. Something about the way the world blurred right past me forced me to realize how deeply I had sunk into the background. The morning had begun with promise wrapped in the kind of soft, pale light that makes you believe good things are coming. I had arrived at the venue before dawn, my hair barely tamed into a semblance of order, clutching my ever-faithful clipboard like a lifeline. Beside me, Jacob, my 8-year-old anchor, slumped in the back seat, cradling a half-smashed Pop-Tart in one hand, his lashes still heavy with sleep. The hall at that ungodly hour was a cavern of echoes. Each step I took reverberated against cold, empty walls as though the space itself was holding its breath, waiting for life to arrive. I walked its length mentally, arranging tables, envisioning the drape of linens, the soft glow of floating candles in tall glass vases. Every inch of that space bore the weight of months, no years of planning, negotiating, budgeting down to the last cent. Daniel and Olivia. Picture perfect. She all soft-spoken grace and bridal magazine charm, the kind of woman who made people believe in fairy tales. Their love story was tailor-made for Sunday features, a meet-cute, over-misread coffee orders, a slow-burn romance kindled during lockdown isolation. It was the stuff of Pinterest boards and heartfelt toasts. And then there was me, the sister with a spreadsheet where most people had dreams. When Daniel confided that their vision of a dream wedding was crumbling under financial strain, I didn't hesitate. I offered to cover the venue, the catering, the decor. I told him I had savings. What I didn't confess was that those savings had been scraped together for a down payment, a better home for Jacob and me. But Daniel's my brother. My heart has always known where my priorities lie. We grew up together in a world where scarcity was the norm. Our mother, Susan, juggled multiple jobs just to keep the lights on. I was his protector, his babysitter, his confidant, braiding his hair through childhood tears, sitting through endless video game marathons just to make him smile. So when he asked for help without really asking, there was no universe where I would have said no. Over the months, I transformed into the planner, the financier, the emotional shield between my chaotic family and Olivia's exacting mother. And I did it all quietly, believing foolishly, perhaps, that someone might notice. That evening, the hall shimmered with the fruits of those countless, thankless hours. Golden drapes cascaded behind the head table, catching the soft gleam of fairy lights. The 5-tiered cake, a vision of vanilla almond perfection, stood proudly in the corner, its glossy surface unmarred. Guests whispered about how Pinterest-worthy it all looked, unaware that I had bled literally pricking my fingers on floral wire at 2 a.m. the night before to make those centerpieces flawless. I had chosen a simple navy dress, its fabric a little tired, its hemline modest. Bought from a clearance rack 2 years prior, it was never meant to dazzle. That was deliberate. I didn't want to stand out. This was Daniel's moment. I found a seat near the back with Jacob watching him absently poke at his mac and cheese with a plastic fork, his brows drawn tight in thought. He looked so much like his father at that age, brown eyes too large for his small face full of questions he hadn't yet learned to voice. I reached over, gently straightening his tiny collar, allowing myself a momentary smile. In that sliver of time, I felt peaceful. But peace, as I've learned, is fragile. Barely 10 minutes later, Tyler Cooper's voice would slice through the reception's warmth, laced with the kind of derision that curdles the air. Aunt Karen's laughter would follow sharp and gleeful, and the world would tilt. But in that moment, right then, I let myself believe that my quiet sacrifices were enough. The sting of their words lingered, looping cruelly in my mind as I busied myself with a plate here, a napkin there. Tyler's mockery, "looks like she came to serve, not celebrate," echoed with every plastic cup I cleared. It wasn't even my table, but I found myself trapped in the role, moving on autopilot, as if someone had handed me an invisible uniform, and I'd mindlessly accepted it. My hands moved because if they stopped, my thoughts would drown me. Plate, cup, napkin, trash. Repeat. Do not cry. The outside world resumed its revelry. Laughter, music, the clinking of glasses. But inside, A slow burn had ignited beneath my ribs, spreading with each dismissive glance that slid right through me. I kept darting my eyes to Daniel, silently willing him to notice, to catch the fracture in my smile, to see the weight settling on my shoulders. But he was twirling Olivia on the dance floor, his face alight with joy, oblivious. And perhaps that was the point. His world was whole because I had absorbed the cracks. In that moment I felt small, smaller than I had in years. Why was it so easy for Tyler to humiliate me? Why did Aunt Karen relish it so I wasn't the glamorous sister never had been? I didn't sparkle in champagne silk or glide in polished heels. I came from work, from grit, from a life where struggle was stitched into the fabric of my being. Perhaps I did look like help, but none of them knew what I carried. The weight of years spent holding up this family alone, unthanked, unseen. I needed air. The cold night air hit my face like a baptism, sharp and bracing, as I leaned against the brick wall outside the venue. The parking lot stretched before me, a sea of idle cars, their glossy exteriors mocking me with their polish. I felt like one of them used parked, waiting for purpose again. The door creaked softly behind me. Small footsteps padded toward me. Jacob. He appeared beside me without a word, his little hands clutching a juice pouch like a talisman. His gray blazer was slightly askew, his blue sneakers scuffed from playground battles. He tilted his face to the sky, studying it, as if the answers might be written in the constellations. "Are you sad, Mommy?" His voice was soft, but its weight was heavy. I swallowed the lump rising in my throat. No, baby. Just tired. A lie, of course, but one we both agreed to pretend was true. He didn't press. Kids know when to let silence do the talking. He leaned against me, his head resting against my arm, and together we stood there, two quiet souls, in a world too loud, sharing the kind of understanding that needed no words. When we finally re-entered the hall, I steeled myself. I would not let them ruin this. This was Daniel's day. My job was to stay invisible. But as I resumed my self-appointed duty of clearing stray cups, something tugged at the edges of my awareness. Jacob wasn't at our table. He stood near the dance floor, eyes sharp, posture tense. And then, as if propelled by some invisible force, he began walking small, determined steps toward the stage. My brow furrowed as I set down my tray. What was he doing? The music thumped on, oblivious to the quiet storm brewing beneath its rhythm, as the DJ cracked jokes with one of Daniel's groomsmen, their laughter blending with the soft clink of glassware. No one noticed the small figure weaving his way toward the stage, not at first. But I saw him. My son. Jacob. He moved with a quiet intensity, each step deliberate, his small frame swallowed by the cavernous reception hall, yet somehow, in that moment, larger than life. He approached the microphone stand, an unassuming sentinel, meant for silly games and cheesy introductions, and with a tiny outstretched hand he reached up. The sharp pop of feedback cracked through the air, startling in its suddenness, slicing through conversation and laughter like a blade. Heads turned, forks froze mid-air, and a hush cascaded over the room, heavy and suffocating. My heart sank, plummeting into the pit of my stomach, because something was about to happen, something no one was prepared for, least of all me. For a fleeting heartbeat, I told myself he had merely wandered off, maybe chasing a rogue balloon, or hoping to request his favorite song. That would have been safe, predictable. But when my eyes found him standing at the edge of the stage, his small hands gripping its edge, one foot tapping nervously against the polished wood, I knew better. This was no accident, this was intention. I barely whispered his name, Jacob, as if saying it softly could reel him back to me. He didn't look my way. Or perhaps he did and chose not to stop. Perhaps in his small but unyielding heart, he knew something had to be said. Then again the mic trembled beneath his fingers. Tap, tap. The sound exploded into a screeching pop, the kind that makes every shoulder flinch, every spine stiffen. And suddenly, it was as if the entire room had frozen mid-breath. A collective pause. Under the glow of fairy lights and the shimmer of chandeliers, my 8-year-old son stood alone, dwarfed by the microphone. He clutched his silhouette, casting a shadow larger than his years. I pushed through the maze of tables, my pulse pounding so loud I could barely hear anything else. My mouth was dry words trapped behind a rising tide of fear. I didn't know what he was about to say, but I knew it was born from what he had heard. Words meant to wound words I had quietly absorbed. I wanted to reach him to pull him back to whisper that I was fine, that it wasn't worth it. But I was too slow. Jacob cleared his throat, the sound small yet resolute, and then he spoke. Hi, my name is Jacob. I'm Sarah's son. The simplicity of it, the straightforward declaration, struck with more force than a shout. Around the room, napkins were lowered, glasses, forgotten chairs shifted. Aunt Karen shifted uncomfortably, crossing her arms like a shield. Tyler Cooper, oblivious as always, looked up in confusion, his smirk faltering. Daniel, walking back to his seat with Olivia on his arm, froze mid-step, his smile slipping away. My mom helped with everything here. Jacob continued, his voice shaking, but determined. She paid for the food, the flowers, the chairs. She didn't even buy herself a new dress because she wanted it to be pretty for everyone else. His small chest lifted, puffed out as though he could armor himself with courage alone. My breath caught, my vision blurred, and the first of many tears spilled over. I was rooted in place, mesmerized by this tiny version of me standing up in a way I never had the nerve to do. She even helped my uncle when he didn't have enough money. He said each word a slow, careful strike. She just wanted him to be happy. Emotion surged through me like a current, unstoppable and raw. I couldn't move, couldn't speak. I could only watch my heart split wide open as my son demanded what I never had the strength to claim to be seen. And I heard someone say she looked like a maid. Jacob's voice quivered now, cracking at the edges. But my mommy's not a maid. She's a superhero. The silence that followed was not soft. It was heavy, crushing, the kind that lays bare every unspoken truth. Marcus Tyler turned a furious shade of red, his bravado evaporating under the weight of an 8-year-old's honesty. Aunt Karen shrank into her chair, lips pressed into a thin, bitter line. Even the DJ, who only moments ago had been the life of the party, looked like he wanted the floor to swallow him whole. And Daniel, my brother, stood motionless, his expression carved from stone, as if doused in ice water. Jacob's gaze swept the room, searching for something, someone, a response. But no words came, so he nodded a small definitive gesture and gently returned the microphone to its stand. His steps down the stairs were wobbly, his legs brave but trembling. When he reached me, I fell to my knees, gathering him into my arms, holding him so close I could feel the rapid flutter of his heart against mine. "Why'd you do that, baby?" I whispered, my voice choked with emotion. He pulled back just enough to meet my gaze, his eyes clear and sure. "Because they forgot," he said simply, and I didn't want them to forget. In that moment, the air itself seemed to change. Not just around us, but within me. The weight of invisibility, the years of being overlooked, dismissed, taken for granted, lifted piece by piece, as though my son's words had peeled it away. And then across the room, another microphone crackled to life. A voice followed, low and uncertain, laced with the tremor of raw emotion. Daniel. He stood on the stage, now one hand shoved deep into his pocket, the other clutching the microphone like it was the only thing keeping him steady. Olivia hovered nearby, her hands clasped tightly, eyes shimmering with unshed tears. Daniel's throat worked as he swallowed, then cleared it. Once. Twice. His eyes flicked from me to Jacob, then back to the crowd. I didn't know what to say at first. He began his words, slow-weighted with the gravity of the moment. Because he's right. The room was so still you could have heard the flicker of candle flames. Even the kitchen staff had abandoned their duties, leaning in captivated. My sister Sarah didn't just help with this wedding. She made it happen. She paid for it. She planned it. She sacrificed more than any of you will ever know just so today could be perfect for me. My fingers curled into Jacob's small shoulder, grounding myself in his steady warmth. Daniel's voice cracked, betraying the facade of composure. She didn't ask for thanks. She didn't tell you what she did. That's who she is. She's been like that since we were kids. When Mom worked 3 jobs to keep food on the table, it was Sarah who raised me. She walked me home, helped me with homework, stayed up with me through every bad dream, every scraped knee. He paused and the silence was deafening. I get to stand here today getting married, living this dream because my sister gave me the space to chase it. My vision blurred once more, but this time I made no effort to stop the tears. They flowed freely, washing away years of quiet endurance. Daniel's eyes swept the room, his jaw tightening. And to the people who made her feel small tonight. He let the weight of those words hang in the air, heavy and suffocating. Shame on you. She didn't deserve that. None of us did. A soft murmur rippled through the crowd. Forks were set down, heads bowed. The truth, raw and unfiltered, settled over them like a shroud. A ripple of discomfort shuddered through the room as Daniel's words settled their weight, undeniable, leaving no room for deflection. Some guests lowered their eyes, finding sudden interest in their untouched plates. Others shifted in their seats, their postures betraying a newfound unease. Aunt Karen, ever defiant, crossed her arms over her chest, lips pressed into a thin, bloodless line, though the rigidity of her stance betrayed her discomfort. Across the table, Tyler Cooper sat frozen, his earlier bravado evaporating beneath the silent judgment of the room. His leg bounced beneath the table, a nervous, involuntary rhythm that seemed louder than the muted conversations. And then Daniel turned to me. Talia knows Sarah, his sister, the woman who had kept him afloat more times than he probably cared to admit. I'm so sorry I didn't say this sooner. Thank you. I love you. And I hope you know, you were never invisible to me. The words, simple as they were, struck deeper than any grand speech. They weren't rehearsed. They weren't wrapped in polite ceremonial niceties. They were raw, unvarnished, and in their imperfection they were perfect. The kind of truth that sticks. There was no eruption of applause, no triumphant cheer, just silence, but a different kind of silence. A reverent, deliberate stillness that felt louder than any standing ovation. And slowly, like a tide turning, people began to rise. One by one they approached me, not with fanfare, not with empty compliments, but with quiet, sincere gestures. A hand gently squeezing my shoulder, a soft nod, whispered thank yous from faces that hadn't even looked my way all evening. But none of it, not the acknowledgments, not the belated gratitude, meant more than the way Jacob looked at me in that moment. His small face beamed with pride, his eyes alight with a certainty I had long forgotten how to believe in. In his gaze, I wasn't the woman in a clearance dress, wasn't the overlooked sister in the background. I was the hero of his story. And for him, that was more than enough. The rest of the reception passed in a blur, the details soft around the edges, like a memory I knew I would revisit with longing. Something in the air had changed after Daniel's speech, as though the very fabric of the evening had been rewoven. People saw me now, not out of pity, but with a clarity that felt unfamiliar. They didn't see the weary woman in scuffed flats. They saw the quiet architect of the celebration surrounding them. Daniel found me again, later weaving through the remaining guests. When he reached me, he didn't speak right away. Instead, he pulled me into an embrace, deep grounding, the kind we hadn't shared since childhood. His arms around me said what words couldn't: an apology, a thank you, a promise. I should have told them, he whispered into my hair. I should have told you. And because there was no anger left in me, only a quiet relief, I nodded. It's okay, I murmured, the words settling between us with the softness of forgiveness. You know now? Jacob never let go of my hand after that. My little shadow sticking close by my side, his grip tightening every time someone came to thank him. He accepted their words with shy, small smiles, each one bolstering his brave little heart. Even Olivia's mother, who had spent the better part of the day icing me out with subtle glances and clipped tones, came forward. She clasped my hand between hers, her voice softer than I'd ever heard it. I didn't know, she said, her eyes glossy, but I do now. Thank you. Aunt Karen never offered an apology. True to form, her silence was her final defense. But she didn't utter another word to me that night, and perhaps that was all she had left. Tyler, however, vanished before dessert plates were cleared. No one noticed his absence. No one cared. Later that night, after the lights had dimmed and the last of the well-wishers had drifted away, I tucked Jacob into bed. His eyelids were heavy, his body sinking into the comfort of his sheets. But before sleep claimed him, he looked up at me, his voice small, unsure. Did I do the right thing, Mommy? I brushed a stray curl from his forehead, my heart swelling with more emotion than I could ever fit into words. You did the bravest thing, sweetheart, I told him, pressing a kiss to his temple. And I'll never forget it. He nodded a single solemn bob of his head, as if that was all the confirmation he needed. Moments later, he was asleep, his breath slow and even. I sat alone in the living room long after that, still wearing that navy dress, its fabric now creased and weary like me. My hair had long since fallen from its careful twist strands, tumbling loose around my face. My feet ached, the dull throb a reminder of the hours spent on them. Yet for the first time in years, my heart felt astonishingly full. Not because I had finally been recognized, not because of Daniel's speech or the crowd's belated acknowledgments, but because after years of pouring myself into others, into my brother, into this family, someone had finally poured back into me. And the most extraordinary thing, it hadn't come from grand gestures or eloquent speeches. It had come from the smallest voice in the room, from a boy clutching a juice pouch armed with nothing but his love and his truth. There is something profoundly powerful about being seen, not for the glitter you wear or the volume of your presence, but for the invisible weight you carry, for the quiet sacrifices, for the relentless unseen work that keeps everything from falling apart. That night, Jacob reminded a room full of grown-ups what real love looks like. It looks like staying late to arrange centerpieces by hand, like giving up your own dreams to build someone else's, like picking up empty cups in a hall already celebrating because, deep down, you're the reason they get to celebrate at all. I walk a little taller now, not because I've changed, but because I finally believe what my son has known all along. I was never small, never invisible, just underestimated.